Today we're creating 4 romantic cards that are going to melt hearts. I know we're not thinking about Valentine's Day right now, but it is just around the corner. I'm particularly excited about creating these cards, and we'll be using the stamp collection House, Mouse, Heart, and Soul. But that's not what I'm excited about. What I'm excited about is that I'm going to be using colored pencils to color these stamps, which I'm not used to coloring with. And I'm adding a little twist to these cards to finish them off, so stay tuned with me till the end. All that and more coming up. Hi, I'm Jeannie Scott. Welcome to the Upper Craft Room, where we make a mess and create something beautiful out of it. I'm going to start by stamping out all 4 images, and I'm going to stamp 2 of each so that if I make a mistake, I can just grab another one and I don't have to worry about stamping it again. Here I'm using a firm hand to press the ink stamp into the paper, but I'm not pressing too hard, making sure that I don't squish the stamp because I don't want to get a smushed image. After having these stamped out, I needed to decide how I was going to design these cards so that they had added dimension and interest. So I went into my stash and I found these 4 die sets by Spellbinders. I'll have everything linked below, but some of these items may no longer be available. Either way, it doesn't matter though, because you can just check your stash, see what you have, and make them your own using what you already have. However, if these aren't available, I'll link to some other suggestions of what I think would work for these types of cards. And by the way, you can build these cards for any seam builder stamp that you have and any nesting dies. For me, it's all about that layering and that dimension that adds that extra interest. Just think outside the box and start putting things together that you may not have thought of before. Now it's time to start coloring in these images, and I'm using very inexpensive Arteza coloring pencils. I like how these colors look on the stamped images, and I'm getting great coverage. I tried the Prismacolors, and I can't say why, but I don't really like those. And honestly speaking, it's probably a user error because those are for artists, and they're not very expensive either. But I'm not an artist, and I do this because it's fun, not because I'm a pro. As I'm coloring, I'm finding that getting enough color down and really going over the image, working in the color, is giving me great results. I'm actually really enjoying this process. Now, I did also find out after recording this video that there is a colored pencil blending tool that I did purchase. And the next time that I do colored penciling, I will be using that blending tool. And I'll have to let you know how that turns out for me. Hopefully, it'll give me even better results. Now there's a lot of brown in these images, like the easel and the mice and so forth, so I'm just using 2 different types of brown, blending back and forth between the 2, and I'm seeing the color is really blending and smoothing out. I wasn't expecting that. I'm not getting that grainy look like I expected, so that's kind of fun. I am really enjoying working with these colored pencils. I will be using these more often. And here's our finished work, and now it's time to start cutting out those images from the 4 die sets that I chose earlier. I went ahead and cut 2 layers for the dies, one from the image and a matting layer. I went to my Altenew inks and I found the colors that closely matched the colors that I used from the pencils, and I'm inking up the edges of the matting layers with the inks. And by the way, I am loving the distressed look that I'm getting by swiping that ink onto the matting layers. This is some unexpected fun things going on here. You see that ink that's getting onto my glass mat? I'll be using that to smush onto a cardstock when I'm finished here to create more background panels for future cards. I'm not going to waste that ink. This is why I love a glass mat for working with ink, because that extra ink can be used and nothing's wasted. Unlike using a sticky mat or a medium mat, the glass mat is slick and it lends itself to the ink smush cardstock very well. Now I'm adding the ink to the other panels, and again, I'm loving the look it's giving, and that the ink isn't going into the beveled edge where the die left that impression. Look how cool that is. And again, I'm going to lift that ink off of the glass mat using that same piece of cardstock so that I can get like a multicolored panel. And I know I didn't say this earlier, but I don't color the whole matting layer since we're going to be covering that up with the image layer anyway, so there's no need to waste ink where we don't need to. And no, I did not waste that ink. I smushed it too on a separate piece of cardstock. And here we're on our last matting layer where I'm using Crystal Pink, I think this is. And I am, again, just inking up the sides, loving the distressed look. And now it's time to use some foam tape. I'm just using that on, I'm going to use that on 3 of the cards because I want to get some extra dimension. I just love how that makes everything pop. Now this red card, I'm not going to use it on. I'm just going to glue it straight down because I tore that, that's little thin lines in between those sections there, or those little dots. And so I wanted to be able to glue that down so that I could put that in place and make that look less obvious that I tore that. And so I am going to pop up the rest of these. But what I did do is use that foam tape on the back of the matting layer, and I popped it up on the card base instead of actually popping up that image. And then this is our last layer right here, and I'm just popping that up, and I just think those turned out so cute. However, I feel like they're missing something. It needs some more interest. So what I decided to do is use some Post-it notes. I have some long strips of Post-it notes, and I'm just going to cover those edges up, and I'm going to bring in the Ranger Distress Spritz. And I just picked some colors. They have a lot of sparkle and shine in them, in those inks, and so I just picked some colors that I thought would match. And I just started spattering that on. And I made my own, you'll see here in just a second, I made my own splat box, which I know you can buy them, but where I can save money, I can't say that I'm cheap or I don't like to spend money, because that's not true. I love to spend money. But I do like to save where I think, I don't want to buy things that just aren't necessary. And I know they have a splat box that you can purchase, but when you can make your own, I have packages delivered all the time. I just took one of those boxes and I taped the sides together, and then I cut it down on top just so I can make my own splat box. Now I'm popping that up on those inks just so I can get that in the camera better, but you can see what I did. You can't see the oxide sprays, distress sprays over there, or maybe you can, those bottles, but I am just spritzing that. And I used red here, but I ended up going back in and using some, I believe I used some black on that because it just wasn't dark enough. And I did the same thing on this one. I used the pink oxide spray on this, but it wasn't dark enough either. So here I decided to bring in a darker blue and use that here. And see, doesn't that it just pops so much better. And so then I did it here as well. And then you'll notice on the other 2 cards panels, I came back in and I made those darker, and I just added some black to both of those. And so then I started gluing all the panels onto the bases here. I'm actually finishing up here. I didn't think there was any need for you to have to watch me put these on the card bases. But anyway, so I popped all of these up, and they turned out so cute. And I forgot to record when I was adding the sentiments. And so I just, on this one, it says, "So thankful for you." And then the one up there at the top, you can see where I put "I love you" on the cup. And I actually made a mistake because I put "I love you" on the cup, and then I smudged it. So I had to add a little foam tape piece with a cut piece. And I just cut the sentiments down with some scissors. Hey, if you made it this far, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. And if you enjoyed this video, would you give it a like so that YouTube tells more people about this? And hit the subscribe button so you never miss another video that we put out. And click the bell so that you get notified every time we drop a new video. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next video.